What is the best way to barbecue chicken thighs? In this video, I'm testing out several different methods of smoking chicken thighs to achieve the best tenderness, skin, and overall flavor, so you can master this underappreciated barbecue dish and be the hero of your next family cookout. So let's get smoking. Welcome to the Smoke Lab, guys, the show where I do crazy barbecue experiments you would never do at home so you can learn from my trial and error. Chicken thighs, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. They're very hard to get right. The big problem with chicken thighs is that the optimal temperature for the meat is much lower than the optimal internal temperature to fully render the skin and get it perfectly bite through. So you either end up with overcooked and dry meat but perfect skin, or you get perfect meat but you get really rubbery skin. So to tackle this problem, I'm going to conduct a few experiments to determine the best method for the best tenderness of the meat itself, and then I'll conduct a few experiments to find out the perfect method for the perfect skin, and then we'll see if we can combine those two things and come up with the perfect recipe for barbecue chicken thighs. So let's start with figuring out the perfect finishing temperature that results in the optimal tenderness for our chicken thighs. To do that, I smoked 6 thighs on my Oklahoma Joe's Rider DLX pellet grill on low smoke, which is around 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I then removed all 6 of them as they hit internal temperatures all the way from 145 up to 195 at intervals, and then I tasted them for tenderness and juiciness. At 145, the meat was tough, kind of like the consistency of steak, and it was very juicy, but a lot of the fat and cartilage was unrendered and really tough, so it didn't make for the greatest eating experience. So I kind of ruled that one out. I don't like 145-degree chicken thighs. At 155 degrees, the meat was more tender and extremely juicy, but still a bit tough in terms of mouthfeel. Basically, the muscle fibers didn't come apart easily in my mouth. They were still kind of tough. At 165, the meat was tender and juicy. The muscle fibers separated easily in my mouth, so they had good mouthfeel. The fat and collagen in the thighs was also starting to render and soften, so this was my favorite thigh out of all of them. Above 175, the meat became more fall apart and tender, but it was also grainy and progressively more dry, and at 195 it was extremely dry and had barely any moisture in it at all. The data also backed up my taste test. Like the barbecue weirdo I am, I weighed the chicken thighs before and after cooking, and the 145-degree thighs turned out to lose the least amount of water by weight, and the thighs progressively lost more moisture weight as they increased in temperature. 165 seemed to be the sweet spot where the thighs held on to enough moisture and they still had a high enough temperature internally to render the fat and collagen and have a good mouthfeel, so that's why I like them the best. Okay, so in my opinion, 165 is the perfect temperature for perfect tenderness and juiciness, and there's really not any surprises there. J. Kenji Lopez Alt conducted several experiments with sous vide chicken thighs, and he also found that 165 was the sweet spot. I replicated those experiments with a sous vide machine, and I also found that 165 degrees in a sous vide machine for 1 hour produced the best results. But what about the skin? Well, in my sous vide test, the skin was also very tender, it was bite through, and it was not rubbery at all. Unfortunately, with all 6 thighs cooked in my pellet grill test, the skin was super dry, super tough, and inedible. So what's going on here? Well, the answer lies in culinary science. Chicken skin is composed of a very high amount of collagen, just like our own skin, and collagen needs water in order to render effectively. If the skin doesn't have enough moisture, it will dry out before the collagen can properly undergo a chemical reaction known as hydrolysis and unwind and become tender. So if you cook the skin low and slow in a dry environment like a smoker, the skin will actually become dry and leathery because you're drying out all that moisture before the skin gets a chance to render all of that collagen into gelatin. So the difference with my sous vide experiment and the reason I got super bite through tender skin was that the skin was always in contact with a large amount of water in the form of the chicken thigh's own juices at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, so it had plenty of available moisture to complete hydrolysis and get super tender, even though the temperature I sous vide at was pretty low at 165. Now, a lot of recipes out there on the internet call for using something like baking powder or some sort of dehydrating agent on your chicken skin to get better, crispier skin when you're smoking it, or they recommend putting it in your fridge overnight to dry out the skin. That doesn't really work when you're doing low and slow cooking because the temperatures that you're smoking at are so low that you're dehydrating that chicken skin, you're removing all of the moisture before it really gets a chance to undergo that hydrolysis and collagen collagen rendering, and so it gets dry before the collagen gets a chance to use the moisture and render. It works really well if you're planning on frying or grilling the chicken skin, or you're roasting it at a very high temperature of like 375 to 450. It just doesn't do it really well when you're going low and slow on a smoker. It will give you dry and leathery skin. So now, knowing that chicken skin needs moisture to render properly, I did some experiments where I wrapped the thighs in foil either before or after smoking. And regardless of whether I wrapped before or after smoking, I found the skin was tough and inedible when the thighs were taken to 165 internal, regardless of what I did. The skin only got tender when I took the thighs up to 195 plus internal, which made the meat way too dry. So I did another experiment where I smoked first and then wrapped one thigh with the skin up and one thigh with the skin down. I found that the skin down thigh had a much more bite-through consistency than the skin up thigh, which had tough, inedible skin when I took it to 165 internal wrapped. So it appears that wrapping with the skin down in constant contact with that liquid is the best way to get perfectly rendered skin. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, perfect. We have perfectly bite-through skin, but it's still soft. I want crispy skin, gosh darn it. And I think that most people would agree with you. I asked my wife and I asked my friends and family what they preferred, and all of them said, I want crispy skin on my chicken. That's just what I expect and that's what I prefer. Do I want soft skin on my chicken? No. I think in the barbecue competition world that I compete in, soft skin is the norm, and when done well, it's really good, but I think the general public tends to like crispy skin more than soft skin. You guys can agree or disagree with me, let me know in the comments section below, but as far as my friends and family are concerned, they like crispy skin, so that's what I have to figure out. So I did an experiment with 4 thighs. For the first 2 thighs, I fried them on the stove in schmaltz, which is basically rendered chicken fat, until I got a nice crispy skin. You can also use butter if you want, or any type of vegetable oil. Then I placed one thigh skin down and one skin up. Those are the fry first, smoke second thighs. The other 2 thighs, I put them in the pan skin side down and skin side up, just plain raw. I didn't fry them first. Those are the ones I'll smoke first and then fry second to compare. And in this test, I also used the frying fat in the bottom of the pan, so the bottom of the thighs would be in constant contact with the fat, kind of like confeting them. Now, I smoked the thighs on my Rider DLX until they reached 165 internal, and then I fried the remaining 2 thighs that weren't fried or crisped up at the start of the cook. I found that the thigh that was smoked skin down in the chicken fat and then fried second was the best one. I liked it the most. It had a nice golden brown crisp, and the skin was soft and bite-through underneath, kind of like how a French fry is crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. It's got those different textures going on, and even the bits of skin on the sides of that thigh that didn't come in contact with the pan and crisp up when I fried it were still soft and edible because they got fully rendered being skin down. So smoking skin side down in some sort of fat up to 165 internal and then frying the chicken thighs on the stove is the best way that I've found to make chicken thighs. But you might be thinking, hey, I don't want to fry a bunch of chicken thighs, especially if I'm making 12 to 24 for a big family dinner. That's gonna mess up my whole kitchen with fry oil, and it's gonna take a really long time. So let's pull this all together in a recipe that you can just use your smoker for. So for the recipe, I'd recommend first I'm pouring some liquid fat in a small aluminum pan. You can scale this up to a larger aluminum pan if you're cooking more thighs, and you can also use whatever fat you want. I'm just using schmaltz, but butter will work just as well. I'm then placing some seasoned rubbed thighs skin side down in the pan and setting my Rider DLX to low smoke 185. Then the thighs go in the center of the smoker on the bottom rack. 185 seems pretty low, but there's a lot of radiant heat coming up from the burn pot, so you'll find that the chicken thighs actually heat up a lot faster than you think. Now, after 2 to 3 hours, the thighs will reach 165 internal. So we're going really low and slow to properly render that chicken skin and get the perfect 165 so you don't miss that target. You'll want to be checking in on them constantly after the 1.5 hour mark just to make sure you don't overshoot 165. That super low and slow cook is also going to give us maximum smoke flavor, but that being said, if you want this cook to be faster, you can always bump up temperatures to 225, even higher. You just might get less smoke and the skin might not render as well. Now I'm removing the thighs and letting them rest down in temperature for at least 30 minutes. You could put them in the fridge or the freezer at this point for even longer than 30 minutes to really get the internal temperature down. The big issue is when we go to the next step to crisp up the skin, you could overcook the meat. You could bring it above 165 because it's already pretty hot, and then you lose all of that hard work that you just worked on to get the perfect tenderness. So Rest it down at least 30 minutes so we get the temperature down, and if you want to, put it in the fridge or the freezer to drop that temperature even lower. You'll be able to get crispier skin while still locking in that perfect juiciness and tenderness that you worked so hard for. And while the thighs are resting, I'm increasing the temp on my pellet grill to 600, or really as high as it can go. And after 30 minutes of preheating, I'm putting the thighs on the grill skin side down with sear mode on. So that means that the burn pot is exposed to the grill. You can actually see the flames coming out of those holes. And I'm grilling them skin side down for roughly a minute, or until they get some nice grill marks and crispy golden brown skin without going so far as to burn them to a crisp. Now I'm lightly saucing them with Blues Hog Tennessee Red. You can use your favorite sauce, and if you want, you can put them back on the top rack of the smoker on low smoke to tack up the sauce a bit and add some more smoke flavor. Juicy, crispy bite through skin, barbecue flavor, and smoke, the perfect barbecued chicken thigh. If you guys have any ideas for future Smoke Lab videos, feel free to drop them in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe to the Oklahoma Joe's YouTube channel. Check out my channel, Smoke Trails Barbecue, for more barbecue experiments. I will see you in the next video, guys. Happy smoking.